Paris, 1925. A radiant ballerina, Claire Dubois, lies dead in her studio, a single stab wound to her heart, the grand mirror beside her shattered into 1,000 pieces. Hercule Poirot steps into a web of passion and deceit, where a jealous rival, a secretive choreographer, and an obsessed fan hide dark motives. A bloodied shard, a singed note, and whispers of a forbidden affair lead Poirot to unravel a dance of love and betrayal, where one desperate act turned a stage of grace into a scene of murder. Will the truth reflect in the crimson mirror? Chapter 1. The Shattered Studio. The autumn drizzle painted the cobblestones of Rue de la Paix with a somber sheen as Hercule Poirot alighted from the taxi, his patent leather shoes clicking precisely against the pavement. His overcoat, immaculate despite the weather, was buttoned against the Parisian chill, and his mustache, a triumph of symmetry, bristled slightly as he surveyed the unassuming facade of the Étoile Ballet studio. A young constable, his face ashen beneath his cap, stood at the entrance, shifting nervously. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice betraying a tremor. "It's a dreadful affair. Mademoiselle Claire Dubois. She's been found dead inside." Murdered Poirot's green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, flickered with interest. "Murdered, you say? Eh bien, let us see what tragedy unfolds within beside him." Captain Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat and muttered, "Ghastly business, Poirot." A dancer of all people, Poirot merely inclined his head, his mind already at work, and stepped into the studio. The interior was a study in contrasts, the elegance of polished oak floors and high ceilings marred by the stark presence of death. A faint scent of rosin and beeswax hung in the air, undercut by a metallic tang that Poirot recognized at once. At the far end of the room, near the bar that lined the wall, lay the body of Claire Dubois, her lithe form crumpled like a discarded marionette. Her leotard, once pristine white, was now a canvas of crimson, the blood pooling beneath her in a grim halo. A single wound, precise and deep, pierced her chest, suggesting a blade wielded with chilling accuracy. Poirot's gaze moved from the body to the most striking feature of the scene. A massive mirror, once spanning the length of the wall, now reduced to a jagged heap of glittering fragments. Shards of glass sparkled under the flickering chandelier, casting fractured reflections across the room. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his gloved fingers brushing the air as if to trace the chaos. "This mirror, it is not merely broken, it has been obliterated." The constable, hovering nearby, cleared his throat. "We found her this morning, sir. The cleaning woman screamed the place down at 6 o'clock. No one saw anything. Or so they claim." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he crouched beside Claire's body, careful not to disturb the scene. Her face, even in death, retained a haunting grace, her dark hair fanned across the floor. "A dancer of such promise," he said softly, "cut down in her prime. But why? And this mirror, why destroy so grand a thing?" Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, ventured, "Perhaps it was an accident, Poirot. A struggle, maybe." Poirot's lips curved into a faint, reproachful smile. "Non, non, Hastings. An accident does not account for such precision in the wound, nor such thoroughness in the destruction of the mirror. This was no act of impulse. The killer, he had a purpose rising." Poirot paced the room, his small, neat steps echoing in the silence. He paused by the pile of shattered glass, his eyes catching a curious detail. A single shard, lodged in a crack in the floorboards, bore a faint smear of blood, distinct from the pool beneath Claire. He extracted it with a handkerchief, holding it to the light. "This blood," he said almost to himself, "it is not hers." A clue, perhaps, of the one who wielded the blade. The constable coughed, gesturing toward the door. "The others are waiting in the anteroom, Monsieur Poirot." The people closest to her, 3 of them, all with ties to Mademoiselle Dubois. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Bon, let us meet these players in our little drama. The truth it hides in their words, their glances, their lies." As they moved toward the anteroom, Poirot's mind churned. The studio, with its shattered mirror and lifeless star, was a stage set for a crime of calculated malice. The bloodied shard, the precise stab, the deliberate destruction, all pointed to a mind that planned, that concealed. "Hastings," he said, pausing at the threshold, "this is no ordinary murder." The mirror, it saw something the killer could not allow to be seen. We must discover what it reflected. With that, he straightened his tie, adjusted his hat, and stepped forward to confront the suspects. His little gray cells already weaving the threads of a mystery that promised to be as intricate as the dance Claire Dubois would never perform. Again. Chapter 2. The Suspects Assemble. The anteroom of the Étoile Ballet Studio was a stark contrast to the grandeur of the dance floor, its walls papered in faded rose, the air heavy with the scent of old velvet and nervous anticipation. Hercule Poirot stood at the center, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space as though it were a stage. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the 3 figures seated before him, each a study in unease. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, lingered near the door, his notebook open, his pencil poised, though his expression betrayed a certain bewilderment at the gravity of the scene. The constable, a lanky youth named Dupont, hovered nearby, his cap clutched tightly as if it were a talisman against the tension in the room. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his movements deliberate, and addressed the group with a voice as smooth as polished marble. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "a tragedy has unfolded within these walls. Mademoiselle Claire Dubois, a star of the ballet, lies dead, her life extinguished by a single, precise thrust of a blade. The mirror, a witness to her art, lies shattered. This is no mere crime of passion, none. It is a puzzle, and you, each of you, hold a piece. I, Hercule Poirot, will assemble these pieces, speak truthfully, and the truth shall reveal itself." The first to rise was Elise Vasseur, Claire's rival in the company, a woman whose beauty was as sharp as a shard of the broken mirror. Her blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, accentuating the angular lines of her face, and her eyes, a glacial blue, met Poirot's with a defiance that bordered on disdain. She wore a simple black dress, its austerity a calculated contrast to the flamboyance of her stage persona. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and controlled, "I was at home last night in my apartment on Rue des Lilas. I was practicing until midnight. Claire was talented, yes, but reckless. She courted trouble, and it seems trouble found her." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache twitching slightly. "Reckless, you say, Mademoiselle Vasseur. In what manner?" Elise's lips tightened, a flicker of something, anger perhaps, or fear, crossing her face before she mastered it. She flirted with everyone. Patrons, choreographers, even the stagehands. She thought charm could win her everything. It made enemies. Her tone was clipped, her words chosen with care. but Poirot noted the faint tremble in her hands as she clasped them before her. "And your practice," he pressed. "Oh, it was alone, no? No one to confirm this solitary devotion?" Elise hesitated, then nodded. "My neighbors heard the music. They will tell you Poirot made a mental note, his gaze lingering on her. Envy, he thought, was a powerful motive, and Elise Vasseur's composure was a mask that did not quite fit. He gestured for her to sit and turned to the next figure, Marcel Lefebvre, the choreographer whose wiry frame seemed to shrink under scrutiny. Marcel's dark hair was disheveled, his eyes darting like those of a cornered animal. His fingers, long and expressive, twisted a pencil as though it might anchor him. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, his tone gentle yet probing. "You were Claire's mentor, her guide in this dance of life. Where were you when she met her end?" Marcel swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I was in my office, Monsieur Poirot, revising the choreography for our next performance. It was late, perhaps 10 o'clock. I heard nothing, saw nothing." His voice cracked slightly, and he looked away toward the window where the rain still pattered against the glass. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this office, it is nearby, oui? You heard no cry, no sound of breaking glass?" Marcel shook his head too quickly, Poirot thought. "It was quiet. I was absorbed in my work, absorbed." Poirot repeated, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. He noted the choreographer's pallor, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. There was something personal in Marcel's unease, something beyond the shock of a colleague's death. Poirot filed this away, his mind already tracing the contours of a hidden truth. Finally, he turned to André Moreau, the wealthy patron whose devotion to Claire had been the talk of Parisian salons. André was a man in his late 30s, handsome in a soft, almost boyish way, with dark curls and a silk scarf knotted loosely at his throat. His hands, adorned with a single gold ring, fidgeted ceaselessly, betraying a nervousness that his smile could not conceal. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice earnest, "I adored Claire. She was a vision, a muse. I was at the Café Lumière across the street, waiting for her rehearsal to end. I often did, you see, to offer her a ride home." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "A devoted admirer indeed. And this café, it is open late, no? The staff, they confirm your presence?" André's smile faltered. "I was there until 9, perhaps 9:30. Then I left. I assumed Claire had gone home another way." His eyes dropped to the floor, and Poirot caught the flicker of guilt, or was it fear, in his expression. "You left," Poirot said softly, "and yet you did not see her depart. Curious, no?" The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's questions settling over the suspects like a fog. Hastings, scribbling furiously, glanced up, his brow furrowed. "Poirot," he whispered, leaning close, "they all seem rattled." "But who wouldn't be, with a murder like this?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Rattled, yes, Hastings. But not all fear is born of innocence. Observe their hands, their eyes. The body, it speaks when the tongue lies." Poirot paced the room, his small, precise steps a counterpoint to the tension. He stopped before a small table where a vase of wilting roses stood, their petals curling like secrets. "Let us consider," he said, addressing the group once more. "Mademoiselle Dubois was no ordinary dancer. She was a star, a beacon in this world of art and ambition. Who would wish to extinguish such a light? Mademoiselle Vasseur, you speak of enemies. Name them." Elise's eyes flashed, but she held her tongue. I know of none specific, she said at last. But her charm offended many. Poirot nodded, turning to Marcel. And you, Monsieur Lefebvre, you who shaped her dances. Did she challenge you, perhaps? A disagreement, a clash of wills? Marcel's fingers tightened around the pencil, snapping it with a sharp crack. She was headstrong, he admitted, but I respected her. We argued, yes, but only about the work. Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing the half-truth in his words. To André, he said, your devotion, Monsieur Moreau, it was known to all. Did Mademoiselle Dubois return your affection, or was it, how do you say, unrequited? André flushed, his hands twisting the scarf. She was kind to me, he said. I asked for nothing more. But his voice wavered, and Poirot's mind noted the crack in his facade. The constable Dupont coughed nervously. Monsieur Poirot, there's something else. The cleaning woman, Madame Leclerc, she found a scrap of paper near the body. It's in the evidence bag. He produced a small, crumpled note, its edges singed as though it had been near a flame. Poirot took it, his gloved fingers unfolding it with care. The words, scrawled in hasty ink, read, Meet me at 9. We must end this. No signature, no addressee, but the implication was clear. Interesting, Poirot murmured, holding the note to the light. This was written in haste, yet with purpose. To whom was it addressed, and why was it not destroyed? He glanced at the suspects, noting Elise's sudden stillness, Marcel's quick intake of breath, André's widened eyes. This note, he continued, is a thread in our tapestry. We shall follow it. He turned to Dupont. The studio, it was locked last night, oui? The constable nodded. Yes, sir. The night watchman, old Jacques, said he locked up at 8. Only those with keys could enter, Madame Leclerc, Monsieur Lefebvre, and the dancers, including Claire and Mademoiselle Vasseur. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A locked room, a broken mirror, a single wound. This is a crime of intimacy, of secrets. Someone here knows more than they say. He dismissed the suspects, instructing them to remain in Paris. As they filed out, Elise's head was held high, Marcel's shoulders slumped, and André's scarf trailed like a flag of defeat. Hastings closed his notebook with a snap. Poirot, they all have alibis, shaky as they are. But that note, it's a clue, isn't it? Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. A clue, yes, but also a question. Who met Claire at 9? And what was it that must end? As they stepped into the rain-soaked street, Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. Elise's cold ambition, Marcel's nervous evasion, André's fervent devotion, the singed note, the bloodied shard of glass. The mirror, he thought, had seen more than Claire's reflection. It had seen the truth. And he, Hercule Poirot, would uncover it, piece by glittering piece. Chapter 3. The mirror's secret. The rain had ceased, leaving the Parisian air crisp and heavy with the scent of wet stone as Hercule Poirot stood once more in the silent expanse of the Étoile Ballet Studio. The morning light, filtered through high windows, cast a cold glow across the polished floor, where the chalk outline of Claire Dubois' body remained, a ghostly echo of her final pose. The shattered mirror, its fragments glinting like scattered stars, dominated the room, and Poirot's gaze was drawn to it as a moth to flame. Captain Hastings, bundled in his overcoat, stood near the bar, his breath visible in the chill. Poirot, he said, his voice low, this place gives me the creeps. That mirror, why smash it to bits? Poirot's gloved hand hovered over the pile of broken glass. his movements precise, almost reverent. The mirror, mon ami, is the key. It was not broken in haste or rage, but with purpose. Observe. He gestured to the frame, its ornate gilding untouched by violence. No scratches, no dents. The destruction was methodical, not chaotic. The killer wished to obliterate something, perhaps a reflection, perhaps a truth. His eyes, sharp and searching, scanned the debris, and he knelt, his small frame folding with the grace of a dancer. From the scattered shards he retrieved the tiny piece he had noted the previous day, its edge stained with a drop of blood, distinct from the pool that had surrounded Claire. He held it to the light, the crimson fleck catching the sun like a ruby. "This blood," he murmured, "it is not Mademoiselle Dubois'. The wound in her heart, it bled profusely, oui, but this shard was embedded in the floor, far from her body. Another was wounded here, Hastings, and I suspect it was the killer." Hastings frowned, his brow creasing. "Another wound? But there was no sign of a struggle, Poirot." The studio was tidy, save for the mirror. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Précisément. The absence of struggle is itself a clue." The killer struck swiftly, with precision, and then turned their attention to the mirror. Why? What did it show that could not be allowed to remain? He rose, dusting his gloves, and paced the length of the room, his steps measured, his mind a whirl of calculations. The studio was a place of beauty, of art, yet it had become a stage for murder. The bar, polished to a gleam, bore no fingerprints. The floor, save for the blood and glass, was pristine. Poirot paused by the window where a faint smudge caught his eye, a trace of wax, perhaps, or grease on the sill. He filed it away, his thoughts returning to the suspects. Elise Vasseur's icy ambition, Marcel Lefebvre's nervous evasion, André Moreau's fervent devotion. Each had a motive, each a secret, but the mirror held the answer. "Consider, Hastings," he said, turning to his friend. "The mirror, it is the heart of this studio. It reflects every step, every gesture, it sees all. If you were a killer, would you not fear its gaze? To destroy it is to destroy a witness, non?" Hastings blinked, his expression one of dawning realization. "You think the killer was seen in it?" "By whom?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps by no one, Hastings. Perhaps by themselves. Guilt, it is a powerful force. Or perhaps the mirror revealed something else. A clue, a detail that the killer could not risk." He moved to the center of the room, reconstructing the crime in his mind. Claire, rehearsing late, alone, or so she thought. A figure enters, a blade flashes, a single thrust to the heart. She falls lifeless, and the killer, in a moment of cold calculation, turns to the mirror. Blow after blow, the glass shatters, but one shard, bloodied, lodges in the floor. The killer was careless, Poirot mused, or distracted. This shard, it betrays them. He beckoned to Constable Dupont, who had been hovering near the door, his youthful face pale with the weight of the case. "Monsieur Dupont, you have examined the premises, oui? Tell me of the entrances, the exits." Dupont nodded, his cap bobbing. "The main door was locked, sir, as was the back entrance. Old Jacques, the watchman, swears he secured both at 8 o'clock. Only those with keys could have entered. Madame Leclerc, Monsieur Lefebvre, Mademoiselle Vasseur, and Claire herself." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the windows?" Dupont hesitated. "Locked, sir, but one in the back corridor was loose. It could be opened from the outside." With effort, Poirot nodded, his mind seizing on the detail. A loose window, a smudge of wax, small threads, but in the tapestry of a crime, no thread was insignificant. And this Madame Leclerc, he continued, she found the body. What did she see? Dupont consulted his notebook. She arrived at 6, sir, to clean. She saw the body, the blood, the mirror, screamed and ran for Jacques. She swears she touched nothing. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Nothing? Not even the glass? Dupont shook his head. She was too frightened, sir. Said the place felt cursed. Poirot turned back to the mirror's remains, his fingers brushing the air as if tracing an invisible pattern. Cursed, perhaps, but not by spirits, by human passion, human deceit. This bloodied shard, it tells a story. The killer, in their haste to destroy, cut themselves. Not deeply, perhaps, but enough to leave this mark. We must find a wound, Hastings, a scratch, a bandage, a hidden pain. Hastings rubbed his chin, his expression skeptical. But Poirot, all three suspects seemed rattled, not injured. Marcel's hands were trembling, but I saw no blood. Elise was steady as a rock, and André, well, he was a nervous wreck, but no cuts or bruises. Poirot's smile was patient, almost indulgent. The body conceals, Hastings. A glove, a sleeve, a careful posture, these can hide much. We must observe closely, not just with the eyes, but with the mind. He pocketed the shard, wrapping it carefully in his handkerchief, and turned to the door. Come, Hastings. We shall visit the scene of Mademoiselle Vasseur's practice, and then perhaps Monsieur Lefebvre's office. The mirror has spoken, but the suspects, they must now sing. As they stepped into the street, the Parisian morning bustling around them. Poirot's thoughts were a whirl of images. The precise wound, the shattered glass, the smudged window, the singed note from the anteroom. The crime was a dance, each step deliberate, each gesture revealing. The bloodied shard was a clue, but not the only one. Somewhere in the alibis and evasions of Elise, Marcel, and André lay the truth, waiting for Hercule Poirot's little gray cells to uncover it. Chapter 4. The Rival's Ambition. The late morning sun cast a pale glow over the narrow streets of Montmartre, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to Elise Vasseur's apartment on Rue des Lilas. The air was sharp with the scent of fresh bread from a nearby boulangerie, but Poirot's mind was far from such mundane pleasures. His polished shoes clicked rhythmically on the cobblestones, each step a metronome to his thoughts, which danced around the enigma of Claire Dubois' murder. Hastings, trailing slightly, adjusted his scarf against the autumn chill. Poirot, he ventured, and do you really think Elise Vasseur could have done it? She's cold as ice, I'll grant you, but murder? That's a stretch. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing beneath it. Mon ami, the heart that appears cold often burns with the fiercest fire. Mademoiselle Vasseur's ambition, it is a force, no? We shall see if it drove her to extinguish a rival's light. They paused before a modest building, its facade weathered but proud, with geraniums spilling from window boxes. A brass plate beside the door read Vasseur, troisième étage. Poirot pressed the bell, his gloved finger precise, and waited. Elise opened the door, her expression one of guarded surprise. She wore a simple gray sweater and skirt, her blonde hair still bound in a tight bun, accentuating the sharp planes of her face. Her blue eyes, glacial and unyielding, met Poirot's with a challenge. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, her voice clipped. I expected you might come. Please enter. She stepped aside, revealing a small, orderly apartment that seemed to reflect her disciplined nature. The walls were adorned with posters of her performances, Giselle, Swan Lake, but none bore the prominence of Claire Dubois' name, a fact Poirot noted with interest. The sitting room was sparse, furnished with a worn sofa, a small table, and a gramophone in the corner, its needle resting on a record of Tchaikovsky. A pair of ballet slippers hung on a hook by the door, their satin ribbons neatly tied. Poirot's eyes lingered on them, noting their pristine soles, an oddity for a dancer's well-worn tools. Mademoiselle Vasseur, he began, settling into a chair with the air of a conductor before an orchestra. You have told us you were here, practicing on the night of Mademoiselle Dubois' death. Alone, oui? Elise nodded, her posture rigid. Yes, until midnight. My neighbors will confirm the music. I was working on the pas de deux from La Sylphide. Claire's role. Her lips tightened at the mention of her rival, and Poirot's keen gaze caught the flicker of resentment in her eyes. You envied her, non? He asked, his tone gentle but probing. She was the étoile, the star, while you, with all your skill, remained in her shadow. Elise's hands clenched, then relaxed, a deliberate act of control. I worked harder, she said, her voice low but steady. Claire had charm, yes, but she lacked discipline. She stole roles with smiles, not talent. I didn't hate her, Monsieur Poirot, but I won't pretend I mourn her loss. Her candor was striking, yet Poirot sensed a carefully curated truth, one that concealed as much as it revealed. He rose, pacing the small room, his small frame filling the space with quiet authority. And these enemies you spoke of, he continued, those offended by her charm, who were they? Names, mademoiselle, if you please. Elise hesitated, her eyes darting to the window where the geranium swayed in the breeze. No one specific, she said at last. The company is a world of egos. Claire's flirtations, her way of winning favor, rubbed many the wrong way. Ask the stagehands, the costumers. They'll tell you. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging her words. He paused by the gramophone, noting a faint scratch on its surface, as if it had been moved recently. Your practice, he said, turning to her. It requires space, oui? You danced here, in this room? Elise nodded, pointing to a cleared area near the window. It's small, but enough for footwork. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet your slippers, they are pristine. No wear, no dust. Curious for a dancer who claimed such dedication, Elise's face remained impassive, but a faint flush crept up her neck. I clean them after every session, she said quickly. A habit. Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes gleamed with suspicion. A commendable habit, he murmured, moving to the window. The sill was clean, but a faint residue caught his eye. A trace of wax, similar to that in the studio. He made no comment, but his mind seized on the detail, a thread to be woven into the tapestry of the crime. Hastings, who had been silent, cleared his throat. Mademoiselle Vasseur, did you see Claire that evening? At the studio, perhaps? Elise shook her head. I left at 7 after rehearsal. Claire stayed behind, as she often did. She liked to practice alone. Her voice was steady, but Poirot noted the slight tightening of her jaw, a sign of strain. Tell me, Poirot said, his tone conversational yet incisive. Did Mademoiselle Dubois ever speak of her personal life? A lover, perhaps, or a rival beyond the stage? Elise's eyes flickered, a momentary lapse in her composure. She kept her secrets, she said. But there were rumors about her and Marcel Lefebvre. Nothing confirmed, but they were close. Her tone held a hint of disdain, and Poirot filed it away. A lover, a choreographer with trembling hands, another piece of the puzzle. He thanked Elise, his courtesy impeccable, and led Hastings back to the street. The sun had climbed higher, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration. "She's hiding something, isn't she? That business about the slippers, it doesn't add up." Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "The slippers, the wax, her guarded words, all are clues, Hastings. Mademoiselle Vasseur is a woman of ambition, but also of control. If she killed, it was not in passion, but in calculation. Yet we must confirm her alibi." They hailed a taxi, directing it to the studio to follow up with Elise's neighbors. The concierge, a stout woman with a penchant for gossip, confirmed hearing music from Elise's apartment until late, but could not say if Elise herself was present. "The walls are thin," she said, "but I don't spy on my tenants." Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to the wax on the sill, the pristine slippers, the hint of an affair. Elise's ambition was a motive, but was it enough to drive her to murder? As they stepped back into the taxi, Poirot's thoughts were a whirl of details. The bloodied shard, the singed note, the smudged windows. Elise Vasseur was a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole picture. "To Monsieur Lefebvre's office, Hastings," he said, his voice firm. "The choreographer, he holds another key. And I suspect his secrets are less well guarded." Chapter 5. The Choreographer's Mask. The taxi wound through the bustling streets of Paris, its wheels humming against the damp cobblestones as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the Théâtre des Étoiles, where Marcel Lefebvre kept his office. The afternoon sky was a tapestry of gray, the clouds heavy with the promise of more rain, and Poirot's mood matched the somber weather. His gloved hands rested neatly on his lap, but his mind was a whirlwind, piecing together the fragments of Claire Dubois' murder. The precise stab wound, the shattered mirror, the bloodied shard, the singed note. And now, the faint trace of wax that linked Elise Vasseur's apartment to the crime scene. "Hastings," he said, his voice low, "the choreographer, Monsieur Lefebvre, is a man of nerves. His hands, they tremble, no? We must see what lies beneath this agitation." Hastings, ever the optimist, adjusted his hat and frowned. He seemed shaken, Poirot, but who wouldn't be? Losing a star like Claire, it's a blow to the whole company. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile betraying his skepticism. "A blow, oui, but for some, perhaps a convenience. Let us peel back the mask of grief and see what we find." The Théâtre des Étoiles loomed ahead, its neoclassical facade grand yet weathered, a monument to art and ambition. They ascended a narrow staircase to Marcel's office, tucked away in a cluttered attic above the auditorium. The door creaked open to reveal a room that was a chaos of creativity. Stacks of sheet music teetered on a desk, sketches of dance formations littered the floor, and a single bulb cast a harsh light over the scene. Marcel Lefebvre stood by a small window, his wiry frame silhouetted against the gray sky. His dark hair was more disheveled than the day before, and his fingers, long and expressive, clutched a cigarette that trembled slightly as he turned to face them. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he said, his voice hoarse as if he had not slept. "I expected you might come." This business with Claire, it's a nightmare. He gestured to a pair of rickety chairs, but Poirot remained standing, his green eyes fixed on the choreographer with an intensity that seemed to pierce the air. Indeed a nightmare, Poirot said, his tone smooth yet incisive. And yet nightmares often reveal truths, no? You told us you were here in this office, revising choreography on the night of Mademoiselle Dubois' death. Until 10, you said. Alone, oui? Marcel nodded, his eyes darting to the desk where a pile of papers lay in disarray. Yes, alone. I was working on the new production, Les Ombres. Claire was to lead it. Poirot paced the small room, his steps deliberate, his gaze sweeping over every detail. The ink-stained blotter, the stubs of cigarettes in an ashtray, a crumpled costume sketch bearing Claire's name. You were her mentor, he said, pausing by the desk. Her guide in this world of dance. Yet Mademoiselle Vasseur hints at a closeness beyond the professional. Rumors, Monsieur Lefebvre, of an affair. What say you to this? Marcel's face paled, his cigarette dropping ash onto the floor. Rumors, he said, his voice tight. Claire was vibrant, magnetic. People talk. There was nothing improper, but his hands betrayed him, twisting together as if to strangle the truth. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Nothing improper, you say. Yet you were seen arguing with her at a cafe near the studio. A heated exchange, no? What was the cause? Marcel hesitated, his gaze flickering to the window as if seeking escape. It was about the choreography, he said at last. Claire wanted changes to Les Ombres. She was headstrong, always pushing boundaries. We disagreed, but it was professional, nothing more. His words were rehearsed, Poirot thought, delivered with the cadence of a man who had prepared his lines. Professional, Poirot repeated, his tone laced with skepticism. He moved to the window, noting a faint smudge on the glass, wax perhaps, or grease, similar to that found in the studio and Elise's apartment. And this meeting you claim with a costume designer after the studio closed, can this designer confirm your presence? Marcel's lips parted, then closed, his silence louder than words. I may have misspoken, he stammered. It was a phone call, not a meeting. I was here, alone. Poirot's smile was thin, almost predatory. A phone call, you say. Yet your hands, monsieur, they tremble. Your eyes, they avoid mine. The little gray cells, they tell me you conceal something personal. Intimate, perhaps. Did Claire reject you? Did her star outshine your own, threatening your control? Marcel flinched, his cigarette falling to the floor where it smoldered briefly before he crushed it with his shoe. You're wrong, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Hastings, who had been scribbling notes, looked up. Poirot. He's nervous, but that doesn't make him a killer. Maybe he's just shaken by the whole affair. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Marcel. Shaken, oui, but by what? Grief or guilt? Monsieur Lefebvre, your office is close to the studio. A short walk, no? You could have gone there after 8 with your key. You could have met Claire, argued, and... He let the sentence hang, watching Marcel's reaction. The choreographer's face crumpled, not in confession but in exhaustion. I didn't kill her, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I cared for her. She was my muse, my creation. But she was difficult, always challenging me. I stayed here, I swear. Poirot noted the desperation in his tone, the way his hands clenched and unclenched, as if grasping for a lifeline. He moved to the desk, lifting a sketch of a dancer in a flowing pose, unmistakably Claire. "Your muse," he said softly. "Yet muses can inspire both love and rage. Did she threaten to reveal something, monsieur? A secret that could ruin you?" Marcel's eyes widened, but he shook his head. "No. There was nothing like that." Poirot set the sketch down, his fingers brushing against a small ink bottle, its cap loose. A faint stain on the desk caught his eye. Not ink, but something darker, almost imperceptible. He leaned closer, his nose detecting a metallic hint. Blood. It was too faint to be certain, but he made a mental note to have it tested. "We shall see," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. "The truth. It cannot hide forever." As they left the office, descending the creaking stairs, Hastings shook his head. "Poirot. He's hiding something, but murder? I'm not so sure. He seems more broken than dangerous." Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the theater's corridor. "Broken, oui. But broken men can wield a blade, Hastings. His alibi is weak, his manner evasive. And this stain, perhaps it is nothing, perhaps it is everything. We must speak to this costume designer, and we must watch Monsieur Lefebvre closely." They stepped into the street where the first drops of rain began to fall again. Poirot's mind was a kaleidoscope of clues. The bloodied shard, the singed note, the wax smudges, and now the possible trace of blood in Marcel's office. The choreographer's mask was slipping, revealing a man tormented by more than grief. "To the café," Poirot said, hailing another taxi. "We shall find this barista who saw Claire and Marcel together. The threads of this mystery they tighten, Hastings, and soon they will lead us to the truth." Chapter 6. The Fan's Devotion. The rain had resumed its soft patter against the Parisian streets as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings arrived at the imposing townhouse of André Moreau on Avenue Foch. The grand facade, with its wrought-iron gates and ivy-clad stone, spoke of wealth and refinement, yet there was an air of melancholy about the place, as if it mourned the loss of its owner's muse. Poirot's polished shoes gleamed under the street lamps as he rang the bell, his gloved hands clasped behind him, his green eyes sharp with anticipation. Hastings, ever at his side, adjusted his coat against the damp. "Poirot," he said, his voice tinged with skepticism, "this Moreau chap seems harmless enough. A bit obsessed with Claire, perhaps, but a murderer? I can't see it." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement. "Mon ami, obsession is a flame that can warm or destroy. Monsieur Moreau's devotion to Mademoiselle Dubois, it is intense, non? We must discover if it burned too brightly." The door opened, revealing a butler, his expression as stiff as his starched collar. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned. "Monsieur Moreau is expecting you." They were led through a marble-floored foyer, its walls adorned with gilt-framed paintings, to a study that seemed a shrine to Claire Dubois. Portraits of her in various ballet poses graced every surface. Claire as Odette, Claire in Giselle, Claire in mid-arabesque, her grace frozen in oil and canvas. A vase of fresh roses, their petals a vivid red, stood on a mahogany desk, their scent mingling with the faint musk of old books. André Moreau rose from a leather armchair, his boyish features drawn, his dark curls slightly disheveled. He wore a tailored suit, but his silk scarf, knotted loosely, seemed an afterthought, a touch of disarray in an otherwise polished appearance. His hands, adorned with a single gold ring, fidgeted ceaselessly, betraying a nervous energy. "Monsieur Poirot," André said, his voice earnest but strained, "I am at your service. Claire's death, it's a wound to my heart. Anything I can do to help find her killer, I will." His eyes, dark and expressive, glistened with what might have been tears, though Poirot's keen gaze noted their quick flicker toward a small table where a stack of letters tied with ribbon lay. Poirot settled into a chair, his posture impeccable, his hands folded neatly. "Monsieur Moreau," he began, his tone smooth yet probing, "you described yourself as an admirer of Mademoiselle Dubois. A patron, oui, but also something more, a devotee, perhaps? Tell me of this devotion." André's cheeks flushed, and he sank back into his chair, his fingers twisting the scarf. "She was a vision," he said softly. "Her dancing. It was like watching a soul take flight. I sent her flowers, letters, gifts. I wanted her to know she was cherished." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the intensity in André's words. "And these letters," he said, gesturing to the table, "they were returned, non? Or did she welcome your attentions?" André hesitated, his hands stilling for a moment. "She was kind," he said at last. "She thanked me, smiled, but she kept her distance. I understood she was an artist, not mine to claim." His voice wavered, and Poirot noted the crack in his composure, a hint of longing that bordered on desperation. Hastings, standing near a bookcase, cleared his throat. "Monsieur Moreau, you said you were at the Café Lumière until 9:30 that night, but the waiter claims you left earlier, around 9. Where did you go?" André's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing his face. I walked for a bit," he stammered. "The rain had stopped and I needed air. I didn't go far, just along the street." Poirot's smile was thin, almost imperceptible. "A walk, you say? Yet you did not see Mademoiselle Dubois leave the studio, though you were so close. Curious, non?" André's hands resumed their nervous dance, the gold ring glinting as he twisted it. "I wasn't watching the studio," he said. "I was lost in thought." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "Lost in thought or lost in obsession? Your study, monsieur, is a temple to Mademoiselle Dubois. Did her distance wound you? Did you seek her out that night, perhaps to plead your case?" André shook his head vehemently. "No, I would never harm her. I loved her." The word love hung in the air, heavy with implication. Poirot rose, pacing the room with his characteristic precision, his eyes sweeping over the details. The roses, their petals too fresh for a grieving man to have neglected. The letters, their ribbons slightly frayed, as if often handled. A small photograph of Claire, framed in silver, its edge smudged with a faint trace of wax. Wax again, Poirot thought, his mind flashing to the smudges in the studio and Elise's apartment. "Monsieur Moreau," he said, pausing by the photograph, "you were at the café, yet you left early. You walked, yet saw nothing. Your devotion, it is fervent, but is it innocent?" André's face crumpled, not in guilt, but in anguish. "I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I didn't see her that night. I would have protected her, given my life for hers." His voice broke and Poirot's expression softened, though his mind remained sharp. "Protection," he mused, "or possession. The heart, it can blur the line." He moved to the letters, his gloved fingers brushing the ribbon. "May I?" he asked, his tone polite but firm. André nodded, his eyes averted. Poirot untied the ribbon, scanning the top letter. It was a note from André to Claire, dated a week prior, its tone ardent but restrained. Your performance in Les Ombres was divine. I am forever your servant. Claire's reply, clipped to it, was polite but distant. Thank you, Monsieur Moreau, for your kind words. No warmth, no encouragement. Poirot's mind noted the disparity, the admirer's passion, the artist's reserve. She did not return your feelings, he said, not a question but a statement. André's shoulders slumped. She was kind, he repeated as if clinging to the word. I asked for nothing more. But his hands, Poirot observed, were trembling now, not unlike Marcel Lefebvre's. A coincidence or a clue? He made a mental note to compare their alibis more closely. As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused by the door, his eyes catching a small detail. A coat rack, where André's overcoat hung, its cuff slightly stained, a dark smudge, not unlike the blood in Marcel's office. Monsieur, he said, turning back, your coat, it is soiled. An accident, perhaps. André glanced at it, his face paling. Ink, I think, he said quickly, from my desk. Poirot nodded, but his mind was alight. Ink or blood, another thread to follow. They stepped into the rain, the townhouse's grandeur fading behind them. Hastings shook his head. Poirot, he's a wreck, but a killer? I don't know. Those letters, they're lovesick, not murderous. Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light. Love, Hastings, can be a motive as strong as hate. Monsieur Moreau's alibi is fragile, his passion overwhelming. And this wax, this stain, they connect him to the studio, to the crime. We must visit the Café Lumière, confirm his story. The truth it hides in the shadows of devotion. Chapter 7. A Hidden Affair. The Parisian dusk settled over the city like a velvet curtain as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the Café Étoile, a quaint establishment nestled across from the Étoile Ballet Studio. The rain had relented, leaving the cobblestones slick and reflective under the glow of street lamps. Poirot's small, immaculate figure moved with purpose, his cane tapping a steady rhythm, while Hastings, ever the loyal companion, hurried to keep pace. Poirot, he said, his voice tinged with curiosity. This tip from the stagehand about Claire and Marcel arguing here, it's a bit of a bombshell, isn't it? Do you think there's truth to it? Poirot's green eyes glinted in the lamplight, his mustache curving slightly. Mon ami, rumors are like smoke. Where there is smoke, there is often fire. The stagehand's whisper of an affair between Mademoiselle Dubois and Monsieur Lefebvre, it is a thread we must follow. If true, it changes the dance of this crime. They reached the café, its windows aglow with warmth, the clink of glasses and murmur of conversation spilling into the street. Poirot pushed open the door, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. Inside, the Café Étoile was a haven of bohemian charm. Small tables draped in red checkered cloths, walls adorned with sketches of dancers and the faint aroma of espresso mingling with cigarette smoke. A barista, a wiry woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense air, wiped the counter as they approached. Poirot removed his hat, his courtesy impeccable. Madame, he said, his voice smooth as silk, I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We seek information about a matter most grave, the murder of Mademoiselle Claire Dubois. We are told you witnessed an exchange between her and Monsieur Marcel Lefebvre here some days ago. The barista, whose name tag read Colette, paused, her cloth stilling on the counter. Her eyes narrowed, assessing Poirot with a mix of wariness and curiosity. "I see a lot of people," she said, her voice low and cautious. "Dancers, artists, patrons, they come and go. What makes you think I know anything about Claire?" Poirot's smile was disarming, yet his gaze was unrelenting. "A stagehand, madame. One who knows this café well mentioned a heated moment between Mademoiselle Dubois and Monsieur Lefebvre. You have sharp eyes, I think." You see more than most. Colette's lips twitched, a grudging acknowledgement of his flattery. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "All right, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I saw them, Claire and Marcel, about a week ago. They sat in that corner." She nodded toward a secluded table near the window. "And it wasn't a friendly chat." Claire was upset, her voice sharp. I couldn't hear much, but she said something about ending it and no more secrets. Marcel looked like a man caught in a storm, pale, pleading. They left separately, her first hymn a few minutes later. Poirot's mind seized on the words, connecting them to the singed note found near Claire's body. "Meet me at 9. We must end this." Ending it, he mused aloud. A professional dispute, perhaps, or something more intimate. Colette's eyes flickered, and she leaned closer still, her voice barely a whisper. "They were lovers, monsieur." Everyone in the company suspected it, but they were discreet. Claire, though, she'd had enough. I heard her say, "I won't be your secret anymore." Marcel begged her to stay quiet. It was the kind of talk that breaks hearts, or careers. Hastings, scribbling in his notebook, looked up, his brow furrowed. "Lovers? That's a motive, Poirot." If Claire threatened to expose their affair, Marcel might have panicked. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. "Précisément, Hastings. A secret affair, a threat to reveal it. These are sparks that can ignite murder." "But we must be certain," he turned back to Colette. "This argument, madame, did it draw attention? Did others overhear?" Colette shook her head. "It was late, the café nearly empty. Just me and a couple of regulars, too deep in their wine to notice. Claire and Marcel kept their voices low, but I'm used to listening. It's my job to know who's who in this." Neighborhood Poirot's smile was approving. "A valuable skill, madame. One last thing. Did you see either of them here the night Claire died?" Colette thought for a moment, her eyes distant. "Not Claire, no. She rarely came in after rehearsals. Marcel, though, he was here earlier that evening around 7. Ordered a coffee, sat alone, looking like he'd lost his best friend. Left before 8, Poirot's mind catalogued the timeline. Marcel at the café at 7, claiming to be in his office by 10. A gap, perhaps, wide enough for murder. He thanked Colette, slipping a coin onto the counter with a flourish, and led Hastings back into the street. The night air was cool, the lamps casting long shadows across the pavement. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice eager, "this changes everything." Marcel lied about his movements. He was here, not in his office, at least part of the evening. And an affair. Good heavens, that's a scandal worth killing to hide. Poirot's eyes gleamed, but his tone was cautious. "A scandal, oui, but we must not leap, Hastings. The affair gives Marcel motive, but what of Elise's ambition or André's obsession? And the bloodied shard, the wax smudges, these do not yet point solely to him." He paused, his gaze drifting to the studio across the street, its windows dark, the shattered mirror hidden within. "The note, Hastings, it said, 'Meet me at 9.' If Marcel was here at 7, he could have gone to the studio by 9, met Claire, and ended it as she wished. They walked toward the studio, Poirot's mind a whirl of details. Colette's testimony, Marcel's trembling hands, the faint blood stain in his office, the wax linking the crime scene to Elise and André. "We must verify Marcel's movements after 8, he said. "The watchman, Jacques, will know if he entered the studio. And we must find this costume designer he spoke of, or did not speak to. The truth, it is close, Hastings, but it dances just out of reach." As they neared the studio, a figure emerged from the shadows, a young stagehand, his cap pulled low. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, glancing nervously around. "I heard you were asking about Claire and Marcel. There's something else, something I didn't tell the police." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Speak, mon jeune ami, what do you know?" The stagehand hesitated, then leaned closer. "That night I saw Marcel leave the theater around 8. He was headed toward the studio carrying a small bag. I didn't think much of it. Thought he was dropping off sketches, but after what happened..." His voice trailed off, fear flickering in his eyes. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Merci. You have done well. Say nothing of this to anyone." As the stagehand slipped away, Hastings shook his head. "Poirot, this is damning. Marcel was at the studio, not his office. He's our man." Surely Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps, Hastings, but the puzzle is not complete. The bloodied shard, the broken mirror. These speak of calculation, not panic. We return to the studio tomorrow to speak with Jacques. For now, let us reflect. The affair, it is a motive, but the truth, it hides in the shadows of the heart." Chapter 8. The Studio at Night. The Parisian night enveloped the Étoile Ballet Studio in a shroud of silence, broken only by the occasional drip of residual rain from the eaves. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, stood before the studio's darkened entrance, his cane resting lightly in his hand. The street lamps cast long, wavering shadows, and the air held a faint metallic tang, as if the city itself mourned Claire Dubois' fate. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, shivered beside him, his breath visible in the cool air. "Poirot," he whispered, his voice tinged with unease, "it's eerie coming back here at night. What are we looking for exactly?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed in the dim light, his mustache a perfect curve of concentration. "Mon ami, we are here to see with the eyes of the night, to walk the steps of the killer. The studio, it holds secrets that the daylight conceals. The mirror, the bloodied shard, the wax smudges, these are pieces of a dance we must reconstruct." He produced a key provided by Constable Dupont and unlocked the door with a soft click, pushing it open to reveal the cavernous interior. The studio was a realm of shadows, the polished floor reflecting the faint glow of a single lamp Poirot switched on. The chalk outline of Claire's body remained, a stark reminder of the crime, and the shattered mirror loomed at the far end, its fragments catching the light like a broken constellation. Poirot moved with purpose, his small frame a beacon of order in the chaos. "Hastings," he said, his voice low but clear, "stand where Claire fell. I shall be the killer." "We shall reenact the moment." Hastings, though hesitant, complied, positioning himself near the bar where the chalk outline marked Claire's final resting place. Poirot stood a few paces away, his cane raised as if it were a blade. "She was here," he mused, practicing perhaps, or waiting. The killer enters, silently, for there was no struggle. A single thrust, Precise to the heart, he mimed the motion, his movements deliberate, and Hastings flinched, caught in the intensity of the moment. "Good Lord, Poirot, it's chilling to think of it." Poirot nodded, lowering his cane. Chilling, oui, but revealing. The wound was clean, professional. The killer knew her movements. They stood close, trusted. He turned to the mirror, its jagged remains a silent witness. And then, the mirror. Why destroy it? To hide a reflection, perhaps, or to erase a truth. He knelt by the pile of glass, his gloved fingers sifting through the shards with care. The bloodied shard, now in police custody, was absent, but its memory lingered in his mind, a clue that pointed to the killer's carelessness. He rose, pacing the room, his eyes scanning every detail. The bar, unmarred. The floor, pristine save for the blood. The window, where a faint smudge of wax persisted. "This wax," he said, pointing to the sill. "It links the studio to Mademoiselle Vasseur's apartment and Monsieur Moreau's study. A candle, perhaps, used in the dark, or something else, a tool, a weapon." Hastings frowned, his brow creasing. "A candle. But why bring one here? The studio has lights." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Perhaps not for light, Hastings, but for concealment. Wax conceal, can mark. We must consider all possibilities." He moved to the center of the room, closing his eyes, letting the scene unfold in his mind. Claire, alone, her silhouette graceful against the mirror. A figure enters. Marcel with his trembling hands. Elise, her ambition cold as ice. André, his devotion turned to despair. The blade flashes, Claire falls, and the mirror shatters, blow after blow, until a shard catches the killer's hand, leaving a drop of blood. He opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the window. "The loose window, Hastings. Constable Dupont mentioned it. Let us examine it." They moved to the back corridor, where a narrow window overlooked a cramped alley. Poirot tested the latch, finding it loose, as Dupont had said. It could be opened from the outside with effort, but the sill was clean, save for another faint trace of wax. "Someone entered here, perhaps," he murmured, "or left. But the door was locked, the keys accounted for. This window, it is a question mark." Hastings rubbed his chin, his expression skeptical. "Poirot, you're saying the killer might have come in this way, not the door?" "But Marcel had a key, and so did Elise. Why complicate things?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Because, mon ami, the killer wished to complicate. The locked door, the shattered mirror, these are distractions meant to obscure, but the wax, the blood, these are truths that cannot be hidden." They returned to the main studio, Poirot's mind racing. The stagehand's testimony placed Marcel near the studio at 8, carrying a bag. The barista, Colette, confirmed his presence at the cafe until 7. The note, "Meet me at 9. We must end this," suggested a rendezvous, perhaps with Marcel, whose affair with Claire was unraveling. Yet Elise's pristine slippers and André's stained coat lingered in his thoughts, threads yet to be woven into the tapestry. "Poirot," Hastings said, breaking the silence, "if Marcel was here at 9 arguing with Claire, it fits. The affair, her threat to expose it, he could have snapped, stabbed her, then smashed the mirror in a panic." Poirot shook his head, his expression grave. "Panic, no. The mirror's destruction was deliberate, methodical. The killer wished to hide something seen, perhaps themselves, perhaps another. The bloodied shard tells us they were wounded, however slightly. We must look for a mark, a scratch on our suspects." As they prepared to leave, Poirot paused by the door, his gaze lingering on the shattered mirror. This studio, he said softly. It was Claire's stage, her sanctuary. Yet it became her tomb. The mirror saw her final dance and the killer's face. We shall return, Hastings, with the dawn. For now we seek old Jacques, the watchman. He will tell us who entered, and when they stepped into the night, the studio's darkness closing behind them. Poirot's mind was a whirl of images, the precise wound, the wax smudges, the singed note, the trembling hands of Marcel and André, Elise's icy control. The truth was near, he sensed, hidden in the shadows of the studio, waiting for his little gray cells to illuminate it. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. The morning sun pierced the heavy clouds over Paris, casting a pale, almost reluctant light through the high windows of the Étoile Ballet studio. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the echoes of tragedy. The chalk outline of Claire Dubois' body had been erased, but the memory of her crumpled form lingered, as did the jagged remains of the shattered mirror glinting like accusatory eyes. Captain Hastings stood near the bar, his notebook tucked away, his expression a mix of anticipation and unease. The air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and the faint, lingering tang of blood, a reminder of the crime that had brought them here. Poirot had summoned the three suspects, Elise Vasseur, Marcel Lefebvre, and André Moreau, to the studio, and they now sat in a tense semicircle on folding chairs arranged by Constable Dupont. Elise's blonde hair was pulled tightly back, her blue eyes cold and unyielding, though a faint tension in her posture betrayed her composure. Marcel, his wiry frame hunched, clutched his hands together, his fingers twitching as if longing for a cigarette. André, his silk scarf askew, looked pale and drawn, his boyish features marred by sleeplessness. The studio, once a place of art and grace, now felt like a courtroom with Poirot as its judge. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, carrying the weight of authority. We stand in the presence of a great tragedy. Mademoiselle Claire Dubois, a star of the ballet, was struck down here, her heart pierced by a single precise blow. The mirror, her constant companion, was shattered, its fragments bearing witness to a crime of calculation. I, Hercule Poirot, have gathered you to unravel this mystery, to lay bare the truth hidden in your words and your silences. He paced slowly, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm, his green eyes sweeping over the suspects. Let us begin with the facts. Mademoiselle Dubois was killed at approximately 9 o'clock, as suggested by a note found near her body. Meet me at 9. We must end this. The studio was locked, accessible only to those with keys, Mademoiselle Vasseur, Monsieur Lefebvre, and Claire herself, or perhaps through a loose window in the corridor. The mirror was destroyed, not in rage, but with purpose, and a single shard, stained with blood not Claire's, tells us the killer was wounded in their act of destruction. Elise's lips tightened, but she remained silent, her gaze fixed on a point beyond Poirot. Marcel's hands stilled, his eyes darting to the pile of glass. André shifted, his scarf slipping further, revealing a small bandage on his wrist, a detail Poirot noted with interest. Each of you, he continued, has a motive. Mademoiselle Vasseur, your ambition burned brightly, eclipsed by Claire's star. Monsieur Moreau, your devotion bordered on obsession, a love unreturned. And Monsieur Lefebvre, he paused, his gaze locking onto the choreographer, your affair with Claire, a secret she threatened to reveal. placed your reputation in peril. A gasp escaped André, while Elise's eyes flicked to Marcel, a flash of surprise breaking her icy facade. Marcel's face drained of color, his voice a hoarse whisper. An affair. That's nonsense. Claire and I were colleagues, nothing more. But his trembling hands betrayed him, and Poirot's smile was thin, almost pitying. Non, Monsieur Lefebvre. The barista at Café Étoile, Madame Colette, heard your argument with Claire, her demand to end it, to no longer be your secret. The stagehand saw you near the studio at 8 carrying a bag. You were not in your office as you claimed. Marcel's shoulders slumped, his eyes dropping to the floor. It's true, he admitted, his voice breaking. We were lovers, but it was over. She wanted to tell everyone, to free herself. I begged her to stay silent. It would have ruined me, the company, but I didn't kill her, I swear. His words hung in the air, fragile and desperate, and Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained sharp. He turned to Elise. Mademoiselle Vasseur, your alibi, practicing alone until midnight, is supported by your neighbor's ears, but not their eyes. Your slippers, pristine and unworn, suggest you were not dancing that night. And the wax on your windowsill identical to that in the studio. How do you explain it? Elise's composure faltered, her hands clenching. I told you I clean my slippers. The wax, it's from a candle I used for ambiance. I was home, Monsieur Poirot. I had no reason to kill Claire. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, and turned to André. Monsieur Moreau, your café alibi crumbles. The waiter saw you leave at 9, not 9:30. Your coat bears a stain, perhaps blood, and now this bandage on your wrist. A cut, perhaps, from a shard of glass? André's eyes widened, his hand instinctively covering the bandage. It's nothing, he stammered. A scratch from my desk, that's all. I loved Claire. I could never hurt her. Poirot stopped pacing, standing before the mirror's remains, his voice rising with quiet intensity. This crime, it is a dance of deception. Mademoiselle Dubois was killed not for fame, but for love betrayed. Monsieur Lefebvre, you loved her, but she rejected you. You met her here at 9, as the note demanded. In a moment of despair, you stabbed her, a single practiced thrust. And then, to hide your guilt, you shattered the mirror, fearing it held your reflection, or hers. Marcel leapt to his feet, his face contorted. No! I couldn't. His voice broke into a sob. I loved her, yes, but I didn't mean to kill her. It was an accident. She was going to tell everyone, ruin everything. I grabbed a knife from my bag just to scare her, but she lunged and it happened so fast. He collapsed back into his chair, tears streaming down his face, his confession echoing in the silent studio. Elise gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, while André stared, his eyes wide with shock. Hastings, too, was stunned, his mouth agape. Good heavens, Poirot, he whispered, you've done it again. But Poirot's expression remained grave, his mind still probing. An accident, you say, Monsieur Lefebvre. Yet the mirror. Why destroy it? Marcel's voice was barely audible. I saw myself in it after. I couldn't bear it. I smashed it, cut my hand. I didn't think. Poirot nodded, his little gray cells aligning the final pieces. The bloodied shard, the wax smudges, the note, all pointed to Marcel, his desperation to hide his shame sealing his guilt. But a flicker of doubt lingered. André's bandage, Elise's wax threads not fully woven. For now, though, the truth stood revealed, stark and sorrowful. "Constable Dupont," Poirot called, his voice firm, "take Monsieur Lefebvre into custody. The law will decide his fate." As the constable stepped forward, Poirot's gaze lingered on the shattered mirror, its fragments reflecting a truth as broken as the lives it had touched. Chapter 10. The Final Piece. The Étoile Ballet studio, bathed in the muted light of a Parisian afternoon, stood silent as Hercule Poirot prepared to close the curtain on the tragedy of Claire Dubois' murder. The air was heavy with the weight of Marcel Lefebvre's confession. Yet Poirot's mind, ever restless, churned with the precision of a metronome. The shattered mirror, its fragments still scattered like a broken mosaic, seemed to watch him, its jagged edges whispering of secrets not fully unveiled. Captain Hastings stood by the door, his face a mixture of awe and disbelief, his notebook forgotten in his hand. "Poirot," he said, his voice hushed, "you've done it." Marcel confessed. "But, good heavens, how did you know it was him?" Poirot's green eyes glinted, his mustache curving with a faint, almost melancholy smile. "Mon ami, the little gray cells, they do not rest until every thread is woven. Monsieur Lefebvre's confession, it is a step, but the puzzle is not complete until we hold the final piece." He turned to the pile of broken glass, where the bloodied shard, now in police custody, had once lain. From his pocket he produced the handkerchief-wrapped shard, its crimson stain a silent accuser. "This, Hastings," he said, holding it aloft, "is the final piece. The blood upon it, it is not Mademoiselle Dubois, it is the killer's, and it confirms what the heart suspected." Constable Dupont, standing nearby with a notepad, looked up, his youthful face etched with curiosity. "Monsieur Poirot, you're certain it's Marcel's blood?" He admitted to cutting his hand on the mirror. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Oui, Monsieur Dupont. The shard, it was lodged in the floor far from Claire's body. When Monsieur Lefebvre smashed the mirror, he was careless, or overcome. His hand bled, leaving this mark. The police laboratory will confirm it, but the confession, it aligns with the evidence." Poirot paced the studio, his small, neat steps a counterpoint to the chaos of the crime. The chalk outline of Claire's body was gone, but its memory lingered, a ghostly imprint on the polished floor. He stopped by the bar, his gloved fingers brushing the wood as if to summon Claire's presence. "Let us reconstruct, Hastings," he said, his voice low but commanding. "Mademoiselle Dubois, she was here waiting for Marcel at 9, as the note demanded. Meet me at 9. We must end this." She wished to end their affair, to free herself from his secrecy. He, desperate to protect his reputation, brought a knife, perhaps, as he claims, to intimidate, not to kill. But passion, it is a dangerous partner in the dance. Hastings nodded, his eyes wide. So she confronted him, and in the heat of the moment he stabbed her. One thrust, clean and precise, like you said. But the mirror, why go to such lengths to destroy it? Poirot's gaze drifted to the shattered remains, their edges glinting in the faint light. "The mirror, Hastings, it was a witness. Marcel saw himself reflected in it, a man undone by his own act. Or perhaps he feared it held Claire's final gaze, her accusation. He struck it, blow after blow, until it was no more. But in his haste, he cut himself, leaving the shard that betrays him." Poirot turned to face the room, his mind replaying the clues that had led to this moment. The singed note found near Claire's body, echoing the barista's account of her demand to end the affair. The wax smudges linking the studio to Elise's apartment and Andre's study, though now seeming incidental, perhaps from candles used in the theater's ambiance. The stagehand's sighting of Marcel near the studio at 8, carrying a bag that likely held the knife. The faint blood stain in Marcel's office, a trace of his guilt. Yet a flicker of doubt lingered. Andre's bandage, Elise's pristine slippers, threads that had teased at other possibilities. Poirot, Hastings ventured, breaking the silence. What about Andre and Elise? Their alibis were shaky, and that bandage on Andre's wrist, it looked suspicious. Poirot's smile was patient, almost indulgent. A fair question, mon ami. Monsieur Moreau's bandage, it is likely a coincidence, a scratch from his desk, as he claimed. His devotion was intense, but his movements, confirmed by the waiter, place him away from the studio at 9. Mademoiselle Vasseur, her ambition was a motive, but her neighbors heard her music until midnight. The wax, it may be a red herring, a common substance in a theater. No, the evidence points to Marcel, and his confession seals it. He held up the bloodied shard once more, its significance undeniable. This, Monsieur Lefebvre, cut your hand as you shattered the mirror. Your blood, not hers, tells the tale. You could not bear the reflection of your crime, so you destroyed it, but the truth, it cannot be shattered. Marcel, now in custody, had wept, his confession a torrent of regret. But Poirot's mind remained focused, ensuring no detail was overlooked. Dupont cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. Monsieur Poirot, the laboratory will test the blood, but with his confession, is it necessary? Poirot's eyes sharpened. Always, Monsieur Dupont. The little gray cells, they demand certainty. The blood it will confirm, and the case it will be closed. He turned to Hastings, his expression softening. Come, Hastings. We have unraveled the dance of death. Let us leave this place of sorrow. As they stepped into the street, the Parisian air cool and crisp, Poirot's thoughts lingered on the studio. Its shattered mirror, a symbol of broken lives. Marcel's guilt was clear, but the case had taught him, as always, that the human heart was a labyrinth, its passions both beautiful and deadly. The final piece, Hastings, he said softly. It is always the simplest, yet the hardest to see. Chapter 11. The Arrest. The Parisian evening draped the Étoile Ballet Studio in a somber veil as Hercule Poirot stood outside its doors, the last rays of daylight fading into a twilight glow. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of rain-soaked cobblestones and the distant hum of the city. Inside, the studio was now a place of closure, its shattered mirror and polished floor silent witnesses to the resolution of Claire Dubois' murder. Captain Hastings, his face a mixture of relief and solemnity, stood beside Poirot, watching as Constable Dupont led Marcel Lefebvre, handcuffed and subdued, toward a waiting police wagon. The choreographer's wiry frame seemed diminished, his head bowed, his hands no longer trembling but limp, as if the weight of his confession had drained him of vitality. Poirot, Hastings said, his voice low. You've done it again. Marcel's confession, the bloodied shard. It all fits like a glove. But I must say it's a grim business. He seemed so broken, not like a cold-blooded killer. Poirot's green eyes, sharp as ever, flickered toward the wagon where Marcel's silhouette was barely visible through the barred window. Mon ami, he replied, his tone measured. The heart. It is a complex stage. Monsieur Lefebvre killed not from coldness but from passion, a passion that turned to despair. The little gray cells, they see what the heart conceals. The police wagon's door clanged shut, and Dupont approached, his youthful face etched with the strain of the case. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, saluting briskly, "the laboratory will confirm the blood on the shard, but with his confession it's merely a formality. He's to be taken to the station now. The magistrate will hear the case tomorrow." Poirot nodded, his mustache twitching slightly. "Bon, Monsieur Dupont. Ensure the shard is tested promptly. The evidence, it must be unassailable. And the note, meet me at 9. We must end this. Preserve it carefully." It is the voice of the victim speaking from beyond. Dupont hesitated, then ventured, "Sir, what of the others?" Mademoiselle Vasseur and Monsieur Moreau, they seemed shaken, but are they truly cleared? Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained vigilant. "For now we." Mademoiselle Vasseur's ambition, it burned, but her alibi holds. Her neighbors heard her music. Monsieur Moreau's devotion was fervent, but his movements place him away from the studio at the critical hour. The wax smudges, they were a distraction, likely from candles common in the theater. But rest assured, Monsieur Dupont, if new evidence emerges, Poirot will not hesitate. As the wagon rumbled away, its wheels clattering against the cobblestones, Hastings shook his head, his expression troubled. "Poirot, it's hard to believe Marcel could do such a thing. An affair, a moment of panic. It's so human, yet so monstrous. And that mirror, why such violence against it?" Poirot turned, his eyes drifting to the studio's darkened windows where the broken mirror's fragments lay within. The mirror, Hastings, it was his judge. In its reflection he saw not just himself but his guilt. He destroyed it to erase that image, but the shard, it betrayed him. A single drop of blood, it speaks louder than 1,000 words. They began to walk, the street quiet save for the soft patter of their steps. Poirot's mind, though satisfied with the resolution, lingered on the details. The precise thrust to Claire's heart, the singed note, the wax smudges that had briefly pointed to Elise and André, the stagehand's sighting of Marcel with a bag. Each clue had played its part, but the bloodied shard was the linchpin, its crimson stain tying Marcel to the crime. Yet a faint unease nagged at him, not doubt of Marcel's guilt, but a sense that the dance of this case had revealed something deeper about the human soul. "Hastings," he said, pausing under a street lamp, its glow casting a halo around his small figure. "This case, it is a reminder. Love, ambition, devotion, these are the steps of a dance that can lead to beauty or destruction. Monsieur Lefebvre, he loved Claire, but his fear of losing control, of losing his world, drove him to a terrible act. The mirror, it reflected not just his face, but his truth." Hastings nodded, his face softening. "You always see it, don't you, Poirot? The truth behind the mask. But what now? The case is closed, isn't it?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his eyes distant. "Closed, oui, but the heart, it never fully closes. We leave the studio to its ghosts, Hastings. Let us return to the warmth of my apartment where a tisane awaits. The little gray cells, they deserve a rest." As they walked into the night, the Étoile Ballet Studio faded behind them, its shattered mirror a silent monument to a love that had turned deadly. Marcel Lefebvre's fate was sealed, but Poirot knew the echoes of this crime would linger, a poignant reminder of the fragility of human passions. Chapter 12. The curtain falls. The soft glow of a single lamp illuminated Hercule Poirot's modest apartment on the Rue de Rivoli, casting warm shadows across the polished mahogany table where he sat, a steaming cup of tisane cradled in his hands. The Parisian night pressed against the windows, its quiet hum a stark contrast to the turmoil of the Étoile Ballet studio now left behind. Captain Hastings, sprawled in an armchair, sipped his own drink, a brandy more to his taste, and gazed at Poirot with a mixture of admiration and lingering melancholy. "Poirot," he said, breaking the silence, "it's over, isn't it?" Marcel's confessed the evidence is solid, and yet it feels like such a waste. Claire, so young, so talented, gone because of a lover's desperation. Poirot's green eyes, reflective as the shattered mirror of the studio, met Hastings's gaze. His mustache, impeccably groomed, curved slightly as he set his cup down with deliberate care. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but resonant, "it is indeed a tragedy, this dance of love and death. Mademoiselle Dubois was a star, her light extinguished by a man whose passion became his prison. But the truth, it has been found, and that is our task, non? To bring order to the chaos of the human heart." He leaned back, his small frame commanding the room despite its stillness. The case of the Crimson Mirror, as he had come to call it, was closed, yet its echoes lingered in his mind. The precise stab wound that ended Claire's life, the bloodied shard that betrayed Marcel Lefebvre, the singed note, "Meet me at 9. We must end this," that spoke of a love unraveling, the wax smudges that had briefly misled, pointing to Elise Vasseur and André Moreau. Each clue had played its part, but it was Marcel's confession, torn from a soul laid bare, that had sealed the puzzle. Hastings swirled his brandy, his brow furrowed. "I still can't quite believe it, Poirot." Marcel, a choreographer, a man of art, driven to such violence, and that mirror, smashing it to pieces, cutting his hand. It's so dramatic, like something from one of his ballets. Poirot's smile was faint, almost wistful. "Précisément, Hastings. Life, it imitates art, and art, it reflects life." The mirror was Marcel's stage, where he saw his guilt reflected. He destroyed it, hoping to erase his crime, but the little gray cells, they see what the heart seeks to hide. He rose, moving to the window where the lights of Paris twinkled like distant stars. The city, vibrant and eternal, seemed untouched by the sorrow of the studio, yet Poirot knew its shadows held countless such stories. "Consider, Hastings," he continued, his voice low, "the motives we uncovered. Elise's ambition, cold and sharp, could have driven her to murder, but her alibi held firm. André's devotion, fervent to the point of obsession, suggested a heart capable of violence, yet his movements cleared him. Only Marcel, with his secret affair and his fear of exposure, had the motive and the opportunity. The bloodied shard, it was his undoing, a single drop of truth in a sea of deception." Hastings nodded, his expression softening. "You saw it all, Poirot. The note, the blood, the lies. You pieced it together like a jigsaw. But what about those wax smudges? They had me thinking Elise or André might be involved." Poirot turned from the window, his eyes gleaming with quiet satisfaction. "A distraction, mon ami. The wax, it was likely from candles used in the theater, common enough in such a place. It led us briefly astray, but the truth, it always returns to the center like a dancer to her mark." He returned to his chair, lifting his tisane once more, its herbal scent a balm to his senses. This case, Hastings, it reminds us that love is a dangerous dance. It lifts the soul to heights of beauty, but it can also plunge it into despair. Marcel loved Claire, but his fear of scandal, of loss, turned that love into a weapon. The mirror, it reflected not just their affair, but his shame, and in shattering it, he sought to shatter his own guilt. Hastings set his glass down, his voice thoughtful. "It's a sad end, isn't it? Claire gone, Marcel facing justice. The ballet company, it'll never be the same." Poirot's gaze softened, a rare moment of sentiment. "Sad, oui, but necessary. The truth, it brings justice, even if it cannot bring back the lost. Mademoiselle Dubois, she dances now in eternity, and we honor her by ensuring her killer answers for his crime." The clock on the mantel chimed softly, marking the hour, and Poirot rose, his movements precise as always. "Come, Hastings," he said, his tone lighter now. "The night is young and Paris awaits. Let us leave the shadows of the crimson mirror behind. Tomorrow the little gray cells will find a new puzzle, but for now, a walk perhaps, and the promise of a new day." As they stepped into the cool Parisian night, the city's lights shimmering around them, Poirot felt a quiet satisfaction. The case was closed, its mysteries unraveled, but the dance of human passion, he knew, would always continue, as timeless as the city itself.